My husband was gone, and with him, part of me had died too. Then I saw a crumbling castle on the Scottish coast. It had no water, no electricity, and almost no roof left. But standing there, I could think only one thing. Maybe this is where I can start living again. When George died in February 1952, I was 51 years old, and for the first time in my life, I did not know who I was meant to be next. I had been a daughter, a wife, a queen consort, a mother to a new sovereign. My life had been made of roles, of duties, of appearances, of routines that wrapped themselves around every day. And then, in one winter morning, all of that became past tense. I remember the weeks after his death as a kind of strange half-light. I was never alone in the literal sense. There were always people around me, always arrangements to be made, ceremonies to attend, condolences to receive. But grief can make a crowded room feel more empty than any solitary walk. I was present, but I felt like a ghost in my own life. At first, my instinct was to withdraw. I retreated to Sandringham, then to Royal Lodge. I wore black, as tradition and my own heart demanded. I did not want to face a public that was grieving with me when I was barely able to face myself. It did not feel possible to simply step back into engagements, into handshakes and small smiles. I needed space, but more than that, I needed somewhere that did not ask me to pretend I was all right. That was when Scotland called me back. I had always loved Scotland. I had grown up with its light, its air, its humor. There was a simplicity there and a strength that I had always carried with me. So, in the summer of 1952, I went north, all the way to Caithness, to stay with dear friends near Dunnet Head. It is a wild, honest place, where the land runs out and the sea takes over, and the wind seems to arrive straight from the Arctic with nothing in its way. On one of those days, we were driving along the coast when I saw it. Through a stand of stunted, wind-bent trees, I caught sight of a small castle standing close to the edge of the land. The trees around it did not grow straight upwards. They leaned, shaped by years of gales that pushed them sideways, as if even the branches had learned to bow away from the Pentland Firth. Between them, there it was, a squat little castle with towers at the corners, a flagpole, and the sea glittering behind it. The Orkney Islands sat on the horizon like a line of low clouds. From a distance, it looked romantic. Up close, it looked wounded. The roof had been damaged by storms. Some of the upper rooms were open to the sky. Windows were missing. The west wing was in such poor repair that people spoke frankly of pulling it down. There was no electricity, no modern plumbing. It was, in practical terms, barely habitable at all. Most sensible people would have shaken their heads and turned away. I asked to go inside. I walked through rooms that smelled of dust and damp, saw plaster peeling from the walls, felt the wind through gaps where it should not have been, and yet I could not bring myself to see only ruin. Instead, I felt something deeper, almost like recognition. The castle looked sad, not gently melancholic, truly sad. Abandoned, but stubbornly still standing. And somewhere inside my chest, a thought rose so clearly that I could not ignore it. It looks like me. A little later, when I wrote to my treasurer, I put it in plainer words. I told him I had passed a dear little castle down by the sea and discovered it was going to be sold for nothing, just the value of the lead on the roof. I wrote that this seemed so sad that I thought I would buy it and escape there occasionally when life became hideous. I asked, half in jest and half in fear, "Do you think me mad?" Of all the things I ever wrote, that phrase, "when life becomes hideous," may be the most honest. Grief had turned my life into something I did not recognize. I was not searching for a fresh crown to wear. I was searching for a hiding place, a place where I could be weak without alarming anyone, a place where I could be quiet without explanation. The price they asked was around £100. It sounded almost absurd even then. People still mention it as if it were a fairy tale. A queen buys a castle for the price of a fur coat. But the truth is, the money was the least of it. The real cost would be in the years of work, the repairs, the maintenance, the responsibility. I knew that. And still, I could not bear the thought of that little castle being abandoned to ruin. So I bought it. I did not buy it for history books or photographs. I bought it for myself, for the frightened, grieving woman inside the queen, who needed somewhere to go when the weight of expectation felt too heavy for her shoulders, for the part of me that did not want to be watched every moment while I tried to learn how to live again. What I did not know then was that I was not just buying somewhere to escape to. I was buying the setting for the second half of my life. The castle was called Barrowgill then. That name never felt entirely right in my mouth. It carried the weight of later centuries, but not the clarity of its origins. I knew it had once been called the Castle of Mey, and I felt drawn to that older name, leaner and cleaner, closer to the bones of the place. So one of my first acts as owner was to give it back the name the landscape knew. It became the Castle of Mey again, and in doing that, I think I helped it remember itself. There is a particular satisfaction in restoring a name. In a life like mine, names and titles are everywhere, formal and fixed, handed down by tradition rather than chosen. This, by contrast, was a decision made quietly, personally, out of a sense of respect. I wanted the castle to stand again as something real, not just a romantic wreck on a windy shore. Of course, a name was not enough. The first time I stayed there after the purchase, it was clear just how much work lay ahead. The castle had survived wars, winters, and the absence of money, but it was close to the edge. There were holes where no holes should be, walls that needed shoring up, floors that needed restoring, wiring that did not work at all, pipes that barely deserved the name. I could have summoned experts from London, but I did not. I engaged a local architect and local craftsmen, men who understood Caithness stone and Caithness weather, who knew from experience what the wind would do to a careless repair. I loved that about the process. It felt right that the castle would be saved not by distant opinion, but by hands that had always worked inside of its towers. While the builders and craftsmen did their work, I began to imagine what the castle might become for me. I had no desire to turn it into a northern palace. I already had palaces, places of duty and ceremony, where every room had a history and nearly every object had a label. Mey was never meant to be that. It was meant to be something far more intimate, a house, a retreat, a home that held my private self rather than my public role. So I made decisions that surprised people. When designers proposed grand schemes, I chose simpler ones. When opulence was suggested, I declined it. I chose warmth over splendor, comfort over magnificence. I wanted chintz and good chairs, not endless formal furniture. I wanted rooms where people could laugh without feeling they were disturbing the ghosts. Visitors who expected grandeur often found something else entirely. The drawing room became the heart of the house, comfortable and homely, as someone once described it, with a tapestry on one wall, and over time, shelves and surfaces full of small things that meant something only because we had enjoyed them. A gnome tucked into the frame of a mirror, fluffy toys and odd souvenirs brought back by guests from day trips to Orkney. It amused me to treat those silly objects as if they had as much right to be there as anything in gilt or silk. In their own way, they did. I understood that atmosphere matters. A room can either intimidate or invite. In my more formal homes, there had to be a certain distance, a certain grandeur. At Mey, I wanted the opposite. I wanted nervous guests to look up, see a ridiculous little gnome grinning down at them, and feel themselves relax. I wanted people to know, without my having to say it, that they were not here to perform, but to be at ease. My study at Mey was perhaps the most personal room of all. On the desk, I kept photographs of George, 2 of him alone, and 1 of the 2 of us with our Elizabeth. They stayed there for as long as I did. I did not move them to the edges as time passed. I did not tidy them away when the world might have expected me to move on. I have never much liked that phrase. Love does not evaporate to satisfy other people's sense of timing. Those photographs were not morbid relics. They were continuity. They were a quiet statement that the love of my life remained part of my days, even if the form of my life had changed. I could sit at that desk, see his face, and feel steadied rather than undone. That was the power Mey gave me, a place where memory did not hurt quite as sharply, because it had been woven into the structure of everyday life. Then there were the gardens. Gardens had always mattered to me. I had worked in them at Glamis, at Royal Lodge, at Sandringham, at Clarence House, but at Mey, the challenge was different. The castle stands barely a few hundred yards from the Pentland Firth, and the winds that come in from the north are not gentle. They can strip a plant out of the soil, carry salt far inland, and shorten the growing season into something that would make most gardeners shake their heads. I did not shake mine. I rolled up my sleeves. The castle had one great ally, an old stone wall that ran east and west, creating on its southern side a small pocket of protection, warmer and calmer than the land around it. I built the garden around that spine, adding hedges as windbreaks, carving out spaces that the wind could not quite reach with full force. Within that protection, I planted what I loved: pansies, primulas, carnations, and most especially the Albertine rose, salmon pink and headily scented, vigorous enough to climb and bloom where more fragile roses would have failed. It delighted me that this rose, which I had grown elsewhere in gentler conditions, could flourish here in such abundance that visitors were taken aback. They did not expect that much softness in such a hard place. I understood the feeling. It is always moving to see tenderness survive in a landscape that looks, at first glance, too harsh for it. Beyond the flower garden, there was the kitchen garden. That mattered to me as well. I did not want decoration alone. I wanted usefulness. The vegetables we grew had to tolerate salt and wind and a short season, but they did grow, and they fed the house. It gave me quiet satisfaction to know that the land was working, that Mey was not only a sentimental possession, but a living, producing place. Later, I extended my hold on the land by buying a nearby farm, Longo, on the cliff top. There, I kept Aberdeen Angus cattle, a breed I had known since my youth, and I bred them with seriousness and pride. Their portraits hung in the dining room alongside those of the Sinclair family who had once owned the castle, human and bovine genealogies given equal dignity on the walls. It amused me, and it was also quite true to my heart. Those animals represented years of careful breeding, judgment, and work. They deserved their place. All of this, the gardens, the farm, the repairs, and the daily routines, meant that Mey was never just a picturesque escape.
It was work. It was responsibility. It demanded that I be present, attentive, and engaged. And that, as it turned out, was exactly what I needed. Grief can make you feel useless, as though nothing you do matters, as though the world has moved past the part of the story where you belonged. Mey refused to let me sink into that. There was always something to decide, something to plant, something to mend, someone to welcome. I might have thought I was buying a place to hide. In truth, I was buying a place that would insist, gently but firmly, that I go on living. From 1955 onwards, once the restoration had made the castle properly comfortable, Mey became one of the fixed points in my year. Every August, I went north for about 3 weeks. Every October, I returned for a quieter 10 days. The summer visits were full of energy. Long evenings of light, garden work, walks along the shore, visitors coming and going. The October visits were different, cooler, more introspective, the garden stripped back, the sea a darker gray. I cherished both. The house parties at Mey were nothing like the careful formality of court entertaining. I invited people I genuinely liked, people who made me laugh, people who were not there because protocol demanded it, but because their presence made the house feel alive. Days were loose, unstructured. Guests were expected to find their own amusements, to walk, to read, to explore, while I was in the garden, or on the farm, or dealing with my letters. Evenings, we gathered. We danced Scottish reels. We sang. We told stories. We stayed up later than was sensible, and then got up earlier than was strictly necessary. I drew energy from that. Pleasure, for me, was not something that depleted with use. It renewed itself, and in Caithness, it renewed itself faster than anywhere. Princess Margaret once called Mey Mummy's drafty castle, with that particular mix of affection and exasperation that only a daughter can manage. She was not wrong. The wind found every gap in the windows, and the heating, though adequate for Caithness, would never have passed muster in a palace. But I loved those imperfections. They were part of the truth of the place. I did not go to Mey for perfection. I went for authenticity, for the way the walls creaked in a storm, for the sound of the sea when the house was quiet at night, for the feeling that I was, for once, somewhere that did not require me to be anything other than myself. The community around Mey became part of that truth. In Caithness, I was not only the Queen Mother. I was a regular at the local kirk in Caithness Bay, sitting in a pew like everyone else, worshiping in the manner of the place. I met farmers, fishermen, children, local families, not in receiving lines, but in ordinary encounters. They saw me not as a distant figure on a balcony, but as a woman who kept coming back year after year, who knew their faces, who followed the Highland Games, who cared about the land as they did. Over time, we came to know one another in that quiet, cumulative way that true familiarity grows. That meant that Mey was not just a private refuge. It was also a bridge between my life and theirs. The trust I later established to protect the castle and its estate had among its aims not only the preservation of the building, but support for the local community, employment, and the care of the cattle and sheep that kept the place working. I wanted Mey to remain alive after I was gone, open to visitors, welcoming, rooted in the area, not sealed away as a fossil of my grief. Looking back, I see now that buying the castle was part of a much larger transformation. After George's death, there was a very real risk that I would withdraw permanently, that I would allow myself to fade into a sort of polite obscurity, the grieving widow of a king, remembered kindly, but no longer truly present. Winston, in his wise and stubborn way, reminded me that I still had a role to play. The public story that followed was patronages, visits, speeches, and a busy, outward-facing life. It is well known. What is less visible is the way Mey made that public life possible. You cannot pour endlessly from an empty cup. I needed somewhere to refill mine. I needed somewhere to lay down the weight of history for a few weeks each year and simply be a woman who liked roses, laughter, cattle, cards, and the sound of the sea. Mey gave me that. In its rooms and gardens, I could gather strength to go back out into the world and do what I knew I still had to do. I have been called powerful, and in some ways, I was. I knew how to hold a room. I knew how to comfort people. I knew how to stand firm in difficult times. But power does not cancel pain. It only gives you more complex ways of carrying it. At Mey, I did not have to carry it quite so formally. I could be tired or sad or suddenly overcome by a memory, and the house would hold it with me without commentary. That is what a true refuge does. It does not erase your sorrow. It makes space for it and sits with you until the sharpest edges wear away. I bought a castle for £100. That is the line everyone remembers. It is neat, surprising, almost comical. A queen buying a ruined castle in the far north. But the truth under that line is much deeper. I did not simply save the castle from ruin. It saved me from a quieter kind of ruin as well. It gave me back my days. It gave me back my seasons. It gave me back my sense that even after the worst has happened, it is still possible to build up something that might have been lost forever. In the end, that little castle at the edge of the sea became the one place that truly belonged to me, legally and emotionally, in a life otherwise shared with the nation. I chose it. I restored it. I filled it with my things, my people, my work, my laughter, my memories. I loved it, and it loved me back in the only way a place can, by standing firm through wind and weather as long as I needed it.